Hello, and welcome to another video lecture for Mr. Mosier's 8th grade U.S. History class. We'll be looking today at some of the topics looking at World War I. Today's textbook reading comes to us from pages 720 to 724, The Road to War, and 725 to 729, America Prepares for War. Some of our guiding questions today are: what are some of the new weapons used during World War I? What was trench warfare, and how did this prove to be a stalemate? What was meant by no man's land? And then what was shell shock? During World War I, saw some new technologies being used for the first time in warfare. These technologies included the newly invented airplane, which initially was used for spying purposes, but eventually decided that they could also drop bombs from it and target the troops down below. Tanks were also used for the very first time, kind of mechanized war machines with cannons. And then, of course, chemical or gas warfare was also used for the first time during World War I to pretty quite horrific effect. There are also old weapons that were also used that were not necessarily new but perfected by World War I. Machine guns were greatly improved upon as a form of technology. Cannons and artillery that had a farther range and much more of a destructive power. And then, of course, submarines had also been revolutionized to be able to use underwater tactics like the German U-boat, which was very, very effective in sinking Allied ships. The consequence of all these weapons and new weapons and old weapons that were perfected created a staggering death toll on the battlefield. The military tactics of this time still use horse charges, cavalry charges into the line of battle, which when you have a cavalry charge into a bank of machine guns and artillery, it's just going to not end very well for you, which is one of the big problems that the soldiers faced during World War I, are these kind of suicidal attacks on each other, on their positions, that will just create massive, massive casualties. This is a photograph of a soldier during World War I from Great Britain. I believe it's an Australian soldier, and you can kind of see he's kind of dug into this trench, which becomes a large part of warfare during World War I. As both sides are not really able to kind of take out the knockout blow, they decided to kind of dig in and build these very intricate network of trenches that are deep enough for a man to stand up without being exposed to the surface above them, with wooden planks and kind of ledges to stand on so they can kind of peer over top of the trench to keep an eye on enemy positions. And these trenches were actually very, very detailed and pretty massive. This is an aerial photograph of some of the opposing trenches here in an area near France called Artois. On July 22nd, 1917. You can see here are the German trenches here on the right-hand side. They're kind of networked together, so you can literally go from kind of the back lines to the front lines very easily. And then you have the British trenches here on the left. And then, of course, this space between the trenches become known as no man's land, because this is an area where no one would want to be caught out in the open, which is where these armies typically fought for those trenches. So this no man's land, this kind of opposing area between the two sides, was just this place of destruction and death, barbed wire fences, bodies. It was just a horrific, horrific location for those soldiers to be caught in. They would lead charges across no man's land to try to take the opposing trench, and oftentimes those charges failed because of the improvements in the weaponry. Because of the horrific nature of World War I, a lot of soldiers suffered from what we would call today post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Back then, they called it shell shock. They thought what caused the symptoms of shell shock was by the concussion explosions, the sound waves of these artillery explosions, that was causing some kind of mental illness. What we know today is that when your brain is under the constant fear and threat of death and destruction and being maimed, your mind has a breaking point and it will just shut down. And that's exactly what happened to a lot of these soldiers. They may have not exhibited any physical problems, and they may have not have shown any outward apparent injuries, but they acted as if that they did have some kind of physical, some kind of physical handicap, or they couldn't speak, or they couldn't see. Nothing physically was wrong with them, but they were saying, I can't see anything, or they couldn't speak at all. Or they couldn't say, they wouldn't be able to hear things, and there was nothing physically wrong with any of their body. It was all mental. It was all their mind kind of trying to protect them from this daily just being attacked and seeing death and destruction on such a horrific scale. So that's kind of the problem that a lot of American soldiers will face also when they fall into these battles in World War I. So the British and the French and the Germans have been experiencing this for years. When the Americans arrive in 1917 and in 1918, it is this very horrific battle. And a lot of soldiers will come home forever changed. We see this still today with our current soldiers, that post-traumatic stress disorder isn't something that just goes away. It's something that is kind of constant with them and can flare up quite frequently. And for a lot of soldiers fighting in World War I, this was a very life-changing event for many of them. Thank you for listening to Mr. Mosier On Demand. If you have questions, please make sure you come talk to your teacher, but thanks for listening.